समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to ThePrint. I'm Snehesh Alex Philip. Well, today on Defense Scope, I'm not going to talk about any story of mine or any news development that has taken place. I actually write a fortnightly newsletter called Brahmastra, which is only meant for the Print's subscribers. Today, I thought I'll talk to you about my newsletter and what it really entails. The newsletter has gone out today. If you like what I've written, do subscribe to The Print and you will get access to not just my newsletter, but all those written by the other editors here at The Print. This week, I wrote 2 stories on the India's submarine plans. Do click on the link mentioned in the description and read them. The first story deals with the Indian Navy's plans to procure at least 2 midget submarines for special operations, a project that was first cleared in 2006. The other story is about the Indian Navy's plans to go in for 3 additional conventional diesel electric submarines after Project 75 India is inked. The reporting got me thinking about how far India has fallen in building and maintaining submarine strength. Importantly, it made me realize that India's submarine crisis is no longer merely a procurement problem, it is an industrial capacity problem. Unless India develops multiple submarine production lines like other global powers with a continuous submarine building ecosystem, every new project risks becoming another delayed acquisition program rather than a meaningful addition to naval capability. Project 75 India was first envisaged in the 1990s as part of the India's ambitious 30-year submarine building plan. Under the roadmap drawn up in 1999, India was expected to induct 24 submarines by 2030. 26 years later, only 6 Scorpion-class submarines under Project 75 have entered service under that plan, and that too after much delay. The experience gained from Project 75 India, which was to run almost simultaneously with Project 75, was supposed to feed into Project 76, under which 12 indigenous submarines were to be designed and built. The then Defense Minister Manohar Parrikar had in 2016 decided that the 6 of those 12 boats would be converted into nuclear-powered attack submarines that would remain with the Indian Navy and not with the Strategic Forces Command. It will also be funded through the naval budget. If all goes well, the Indian Navy will sign the contract for 6 submarines under the Project 75 this fiscal year. According to the request for proposal, the first submarine is expected 7 years after the contract signing, followed by 1 submarine every year. Let us assume the contract is signed tomorrow. That would mean the first submarine should arrive by mid-2032. I'm willing to bet my shirt that it will not. The reason is simple. What is being offered is not an off-the-shelf Type 214 submarine in production. It is effectively a design customized for India, with the first submarine expected to incorporate around 45% indigenous content, rising to 60% by the final boat. We have seen this movie play before. Under Project 75, the contract signed in 2005, delivery of the first Scorpion submarine was scheduled to take place in 2011 and the last by 2017. The first submarine entered service only in 2017, the very year the 6th and final boat was originally supposed to have been delivered. That was with an existing design and significantly lower levels of indigenous content. If one takes out the labor cost and the money spent on infrastructure, the actual indigenization on the Scorpion submarine falls to less than 20%. As reported earlier, beyond Project 75 India, there are plans to build at least 3 additional conventional submarines, whether Scorpion Plus or more of what the TKMS and MDL will build. The Navy is also pursuing a requirement for midget submarines. Both MDL and L&T have designs that broadly meet the Navy's requirements. Before going further, it is important to look at our immediate neighborhood. Pakistan commissioned the first of the 8 Chinese origin Hangur class submarines this year. 4 are being built in China, 4 in Pakistan. It already operates 3 Augusta 90B submarines and 2 Augusta 70 submarines. It also possesses midget submarine capabilities. The first Chinese built submarine has reached Colombo on its way to Pakistan. China, meanwhile, is in a different league. According to assessments by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, China has dramatically increased submarine production over the decade and is launching submarines at a pace that rivals or exceeds the United States in some categories. Now let us look at India. India currently operates 6 Kilo class submarines, 4 Shishuma class submarines, 6 Kalvari class submarines, and 3 Aryan class SSBNs. Well, the third in the Aryan series is different from the first two. That translates to 90 submarines, including the strategic nuclear fleet. Also, out of the 19, 10 are those built in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. On the other hand, China is estimated to operate around 65 submarines and is adding more at a pace which outruns the US in scale. There is no point in comparing numbers directly. The gap is obvious. However, the comparison does highlight something important. India's challenge is not simply about buying submarines, it is about building the ecosystem required to produce them continuously. The real problem is scale. India's submarine challenge is often viewed through the lens of delayed procurement. However, the bigger problem is scale. Over the next 2 decades, India plans to build 6 Project 75 India submarines, 3 additional conventional submarines, future Project 76 boats of at least 6, then another 6 nuclear powered attack submarines, and at least 2 more ballistic missile submarines. That's a lot of workload for any single shipyard. Successful submarine building nations do not rely on a single production line. They create centers of excellence and sustain production over decades while ensuring that design expertise, supply chains, and skilled manpowers are not lost between programs. This is where discussion must shift from contracts to capacity. India currently has 4 shipyards with submarine experience. MDL and the SBC, that is the Shipbuilding Center, has actually built submarines, while Hindustan Shipyard Limited has experience with regard to repairs. And then there is the L&T that has played a critical role in India's SSBN project. SBC is the preferred yard for future nuclear submarine construction, with L&T supporting critical engineering and manufacturing activities. But what about MDL? MDL remains India's premier submarine building shipyard. It has built 8 submarines, 2 Shishuma class and 6 Scorpions. Despite decades of experience, India still lacks an indigenous conventional submarine design capability that can be led by MDL without dependence on foreign original equipment manufacturer. That raises questions about technology absorption and knowledge transfer over the past 3 decades. To understand what is possible, one only has to look at the South Korea. In 1987, South Korea contracted TKMS to procure its first modern submarines. The first boat was built in Germany, while the remaining 8 were built in South Korea by Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, now Hanwha Ocean, under a crucial technology transfer and licensing agreement. For the second phase, TKMS transferred its highly advanced Type 214 submarine design. These vessels featured the AIP, which allowed the South Korean navies to remain submerged for weeks rather than days. Hyundai Heavy Industries and Hanwha Ocean successfully licensed built 9 of these boats. While the first 2 class relied heavily on German engineering, the knowledge gained from TKMS partnership allowed South Korea to achieve a 76 localization rate for its KSS-3 program. Now, South Korean companies fully designed and built these larger 3,000-ton submarines, which are capable of carrying submarine-launched ballistic missile. Today, this TKMS-mentored domestic defense industry has scaled up to such a degree that Hanwha Ocean is now fiercely competing directly against TKMS to supply the Royal Canadian Navy with new fleet of advanced submarines under a $40 billion project. Despite building 8 submarines, MDL is nowhere in the distant vicinity of being able to manufacture its own submarine or a prototype. MDL has shown a dismal record when it comes to even sticking to delivery schedule. The current management of the MDL has ambitious plans, but then something needs to be done because it cannot be personality driven. South Korea's success was not accidental. It was built on programs, sustained government support, and world-class shipping industry. India cannot replicate the experience exactly, but lessons remains relevant. Repeated license production must eventually create design and manufacturing capability. MDL versus L&T is not the debate. The issue is not whether MDL should win or whether L&T should win. The issue is whether India can afford to enter the 2030s with one mature submarine building ecosystem. A country that seeks to operate a submarine fleet requires redundancy in industrial capacity just as much as it requires redundancy in military capability. MDL possesses infrastructure, experience, and cash reserves that allow it to bid competitively, but then also has to look into the fact that 1 year operating cost without any work is close to about 1,200 crore. This primarily driven by its workforce, most of whom are on their permanent roles, meaning hefty compensation rather than just contracted workforce of the private sector. However, L&T brings private sector efficiency, advanced engineering expertise, and proven record in programs. Both are assets. The answer is not to weaken one in favor of the other. The answer is to build both. Now, what's my radical proposal? First, award the major submarine program to a single shipyard rather than splitting a small order. If the Navy needs 4 submarines, order 4 at the outset. If the Navy needs 4 submarines, order 4 at the outset because it is cost effective if both the customer and the supplier. Second, split conventional submarine constructions between MDL and L&T, not necessarily equally, but sufficiently to ensure that both shipyards develop and sustain submarine building expertise. Third, create a production pipeline stretching from Project 75 India to Project 76 and beyond, rather than treating every submarine program as a separate procurement exercise. India must stop thinking in terms of contracts and start thinking in terms of a submarine building ecosystem. The lessons from every submarine building nation is simple. Continuity matters more than contracts. India does not suffer from a lack of plans, it suffers from lack of industrial capacity and the will to carry it through. The original 30-year submarine plan envisioned 24 submarines by 2030. 26 years later, 6 copies have entered service under that roadmap. The question before policymakers is no longer which submarine India should buy next. It is whether India wants to build a submarine industrial base capable of delivering submarines continuously for decades. If the answer is yes, then both MDL and L&T must be nurtured as national assets. By the end of the decade, India should aim to have not one, but 2 world-class submarine building ecosystems capable of supporting the Indian Navy's ambitions in the Indian Ocean and beyond.